Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to give it another minute or two before we start. So just bear with us. We're going to give people a couple more minutes to come on. We'll give it, see a couple more people trickling in. Thank you for your patience. Okay, I will go ahead and get started. I know we're all very busy, so I want to respect your time. So good afternoon. My name is Britt Parker. I'm with the National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS, headquartered in Boulder, Colorado. Welcome to this informational session on the Climate Program Office NIDIS FY24 competition, Tribal Drought Resilience with Inflation Reduction Act support. I serve as the manager of this competition, and I'm joined today by Crystal Stiles, the NIDIS Tribal Engagement Coordinator. Please note this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Climate Program Office FY24 funding opportunity and drought.gov web pages, excuse me, along with a transcript of the webinar and frequently asked questions generated through the Q&A portion of the webinar. The FAQ we will also periodically update with questions that come in so that all can benefit from the answers. Please note that as I move through the presentation, we will share key web pages and document links in the chat box as well. So we're going to go ahead and go off camera just so that we can maximize the screen that you're seeing, the presentation. And Crystal, just let me know if you're not seeing my presentation slides. It's displaying a little strangely on my end. So we are holding this webinar in advance of the letter of intent due date as an opportunity to clarify the focus and requirements of this competition, as well as answer your questions. Our goal is to be clear and consistent with the information we are providing as possible, and we will take questions at the end of the presentation. You may enter your questions at any time in the Q&A box in your control panel. And today I will briefly cover the following topics. What is the Climate Program Office? What is NIDIS? Some examples of past NIDIS Building Tribal Drought Resilience Grant projects. Some important details about the FY24 Tribal Drought Resilience with IRA Support Competition, application requirements, important dates, and then we'll go into the Q&A and discussion. So the NIDIS Climate Program Office manages competitive research programs in which NOAA funds high priority climate science, assessments, decision support research, outreach, education, and capacity building activities designed to advance our understanding of the Earth's climate system and foster the application of this knowledge to risk management and adaptation efforts. The National Integrated Drought Information System sits within the Climate Program Office, and the FY24 competition on tribal drought resilience with IRA support is made possible with funds that are part of President Biden's Investing in America agenda. The National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS, was authorized in 2006 and is a multi-agency partnership that coordinates drought monitoring, forecasting, planning, and research at national, state, and local levels across the country. The mission of NIDIS is to help the nation move to an increasingly proactive approach to understand and manage drought risks and impacts, and to improve long-term drought resilience with a mandate to establish a national drought early warning system. Since its inception, NIDIS has worked with various federal, tribal, state, and local government agencies, as well as a network of researchers, academics, resource managers, and policymakers to support the efforts to improve prediction, forecasting, monitoring, and collaborating with existing programs and partners to undertake applied research and drought planning and preparedness activities. We share this work and collate drought resources on the U.S. Drought portal, or drought.gov. While our ultimate goal is a national early warning system, we recognize that impacts and information needs differ across the country. So our approach is to achieve this goal is to develop regional drought early warning systems, or DEWs. These are networks of partners sharing information and actions that help communities cope with drought. Each DEWs has many of the same basic ingredients that you see here on the slide, but ultimately have their own flavor to reflect the needs of their region or location and community. These systems are not simply in place to disseminate forecasted information, but to encourage innovation by integrating new, locally relevant drought information and supporting the introduction of new technologies that detect and communicate drought risk and warning. In addition, we encourage learning across these drought early warning networks and value projects and approaches that are transferable. There are currently 9 DEWs across the United States covering CONUS west of the Mississippi, the Midwest, the Northeast, and the Southwest. We are also working to strengthen our support to partners in areas such as Alaska, Hawaii, and the Pacific Islands, and the U.S. Caribbean, and other areas that are not part of a formal drought early warning system. NIDIS recognizes that tribal communities face unique drought challenges and opportunities, requiring customized approaches, tools, and data that are built upon traditional tribal knowledge and cultural, medicinal, and spiritual values. It also recognizes that Indigenous experience and perspectives of drought vary greatly across the United States. To effectively address tribal needs as mandated by NIDIS's public law, NIDIS and partners jointly developed the NIDIS Tribal Drought Engagement Strategy in consultation with tribal partners. This strategy identifies key activities to implement in partnership with tribal nations. Integrating tribal perspectives into NIDIS's work is important to ensure tribal nations are equal partners in responding to drought. The document also presents guiding principles of engagement that NIDIS strives to adhere to in our engagement with tribal nations. These include respecting tribal sovereignty, ensuring trust and reciprocity, and ensuring the DEWs are culturally appropriate and useful for tribal nations. In FY22, NIDIS released its first Building Tribal Drought Resilience funding opportunity. I just wanted to briefly highlight the 5 successful projects that were funded and are currently ongoing. And let me pause for just a second. I know that someone has asked if there is closed captioning, and I'm sorry we do not have that, but we will be posting the presentation and a transcript of the presentation on the website after this is over. So we'll make sure you have that website so you can access those resources. So I just wanted to highlight the 5 successful projects we're currently working with our tribal partners on. They are Let's Get Ready, Collaborative Climate Change and Drought Response Monitoring and Implementation with the Kuruk Tribe, Native Drought Resilience with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes, Developing a Drought Early Warning System and Indices for the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, Wetlands to Combat Drought with the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, and Enhancing Water Retention and Facilitating Groundwater Recharge to Protect and Maintain Streams with the Pueblo de San Ildefonso. And you can learn more about each of these projects and the partnerships that support them on drought.gov. And I think Crystal's going to drop the specific website into the chat box. Now we want to dive into the current funding opportunity that you're all here to learn about. Information about the Climate Program Office FY24 competition on tribal drought resilience with IRA support can be found on the Climate Program Office webpage under the Funding Opportunities tab. And you can also find information on drought.gov, and those links will be in the chat box. Key information and dates can be found in the full notice of funding opportunity, and Crystal will also now share links to those key documents in the chat box. So this opportunity is intended to support tribal nations in implementing activities that address current and future drought risk on tribal lands across the West in the context of a changing climate. Projects could include, but are not limited to, the following types of activities: identifying primary drought impacts, identifying optimal drought indicators and/or triggers, developing a drought communication and information dissemination plan, improving and enhancing drought monitoring, developing an online dashboard with relevant drought tools and information, conducting drought vulnerability assessments, developing drought plans, convening workshops with key partners within the tribe and/or external to the tribe to increase communication and sharing of drought information, and demonstrating the application of drought data and information to enhance decision-making. So again, these are meant simply as example types of activities, but you could certainly propose something beyond this list. Pending the availability of funds, NIDIS anticipates a funding allocation for this competition of approximately $2 million. Proposals may request funding for up to 3-year grants in the form of cooperative agreements with funding up to a $700,000 maximum. The total funded amount will be disseminated in year 1, but can be expended over 3 years. We anticipate funding 3 to 5 projects depending on the budgets requested, and applicants should use September 1, 2024 as the start date for those projects. So I want to briefly go over requirements and guidelines that can be found in the Notice of Federal Funding and the information sheet for this competition. Note that it is key that applicants carefully review the entire NOFO document, but the funding information, or the information sheet can be used as a bit of a cheat sheet for key information. So over the next few slides, I want to go over a series of requirements that are listed as proposals will, and recommendations listed as proposals may for applications. So first of all, proposals will demonstrate full partnership of tribal nations. So if the primary applicant is not a tribal nation, full partnership with a tribal nation can be demonstrated by, first of all, including at least one full investigator on the project representing a federally recognized tribe, as well as indicating through the budget and budget justification that funds are being disseminated to the tribe. Proposals will also demonstrate an integrated project team with or considering partners such as those from the public and private sectors, academia, including tribal colleges and universities, local, regional, tribal, and federal government entities, NGOs, environmental groups, intertribal councils and consortia, tribal LOT organizations, citizen groups, etc. So again, this is just a list of potential partners, but we do want to see an integrated project team with entities as appropriate for the activities being proposed. Projects will also demonstrate adherence to those guiding principles of tribal engagement that I mentioned, defined in the NIDIS Tribal Engagement Strategy. These are located on pages 9 to 11 of the document and include respecting tribal sovereignty, ensuring trust and reciprocity, and ensuring drought-related work is culturally appropriate and useful for tribal nations. As part of the description of project activities, provide detailed information on the activities to be conducted, locations, site, timeline, including seasons, and species and habitats that may be affected, possible construction activities, and any environmental concerns that may exist, as NOAA must analyze the potential environmental impacts as required by the National Environmental Policy Act. So we need that information to be included so that we can go through that process on our end. So now we'll talk a bit about recommendations. So those proposals may. The first is demonstrate external contributions. For example, in-kind contributions or funding to be leveraged with these federal research dollars. However, I want to stress that there are no match or cost share requirements for this grant. The proposals may show leverage of previous or ongoing work related to climate and drought activities, such as those that may be funded under the BIA Tribal Resilience Grants or Department of Interior Climate Adaptation Science Centers, for example. Again, these are just a couple example programs. Finally, proposals may demonstrate partnership with tribal colleges and universities to enhance collaboration and utilize the valuable resources that TCUs have to offer in terms of their faculty and staff, students, and facilities. But again, we want to see that those partnerships are well defined and that the proposal has been developed in close partnership with any of the TCUs that might appear as partners. Some additional guidelines for applicants. Projects teams are encouraged to work with Crystal, our tribal engagement coordinator, to share outcomes and lessons learned with other tribal nations and tribal organizations where appropriate. Applicants are strongly encouraged to submit a letter of intent prior to developing and submitting a full proposal. And if you can, we would love for you to do that using the Google form that Crystal will put a link to in the chat box, or you can also submit those to me directly via email. My email will also be in the chat box. And we'll talk a little bit more about letters of intent in a couple minutes. We've also provided a checklist to assist applicants in confirming that all required components of the letter of intent and the application have been addressed and can be found. This can also be found on the competition webpage and is being shared in the chat box. So next we'll go to eligibility. Eligible applicants are federally recognized tribal governments, institutions of higher education, other nonprofits, commercial organizations, international organizations, and state and local governments. Again, for this competition, please adhere to the guidelines for demonstrating full partnership with tribal nations. Please also note that federal investigators or co-investigators cannot apply to this competition through the grants online portal and process, but they can apply by sending an application directly to me, the program manager. And I encourage you to reach out to me if you're considering applying as a federal agency or you have a federal partner, just so we can be very clear on the process for doing that. I will also note that in the NOFO and on the checklist, if you have multiple partners who are applying separately for one project, or if you are a federal agency applying, there are some guidelines on what is required in the proposal and what components of the proposal need to be mirror images, and then where those divert if you have multiple partners who are applying separately. In addition, this competition is supported by Inflation Reduction Act funds that address Western U.S. drought and water crisis. And as such, there's also a geographical focus. For the purposes of the competition, the West is considered to be the areas within the following 5 NIDIS drought early warning systems: California, Nevada, the Intermountain West, which is in, I'm not sure how it's going to show up on everybody's screen, but that kind of brown color, as well as the Missouri River Basin in yellow, the Pacific Northwest in orange, and the Southern Plains in that darker burnt orange color. Note that if there's a partner that is outside of the region, for example, an academic partner from an institution that is physically located outside of this area, that's fine, as long as the work takes place and benefits locations and tribal nations which are geographically located in what has been defined as the West. So let's dig a little bit deeper, first into the letter of intent and then into the application. Please see the full NOFO documentation again and read all the details to ensure you meet all the requirements of the competition. In addition, please ensure you are familiar with the administrative and national policy requirements which grantees will be subject to when they apply for federal funds. Investigators are strongly encouraged to submit a letter of intent prior to developing and submitting a full proposal using the FY24 LOI submission form. Investigators unable to submit the form via their LOI via the form should submit that through to me directly at brit.parker@noaa.gov. And if you email your LOI, you'll receive confirmation of receipt. If you do not, please follow up with me. The letters of intent are due by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on November 2nd, 2023. The purpose of the letter of intent process is to provide information to potential applicants on the relevance of their proposed projects to the competition in advance of preparing a full application. While LOIs are strongly encouraged, applicants are not required to submit them and may submit a full proposal and application even if they have not submitted an LOI. If an LOI is submitted, it should contain the following: a tentative project title, the names and institutions of primary investigators and other investigators on the project, approximate cost, a brief statement of the research question or societal need to be addressed, a summary of the work to be completed, methodologies to be used, any data sets needed or to be collected, and outcomes to be achieved, and relevance to the competition. If these items are not included or the LOI comes in late, we will not be able to evaluate it. But for those who do submit an LOI, you will get a response within 4 weeks after the due date with an encourage or discourage from applying, though the final decision on whether to submit a full proposal lies with the primary investigator. So no matter what feedback you get from us, you're able to submit a full application, but we hope that the feedback will help strengthen that application. Full proposals are due at 11:59 p.m. Eastern on February 15th, 2024. Failure to comply with the provisions of the federal funding opportunity for full proposals will result in applications being returned without review. So we really encourage you to use things like the information sheet and the application checklist as a bit of a cheat sheet to make sure that all components of the proposal get turned in. So full applications are limited to no more than 35 pages, single-spaced, using 12-point font with 1-inch margins on standard 8.5 by 11-inch paper. If the proposal has 3 or more primary investigators, that page limit is extended to 40 pages. The required components of a full proposal include title page, abstract, project narrative with associated figures and references, results from prior research or projects, curriculum vitae or resumes from all primary and co-investigators, any current and pending federal support related to the grant topic, a data and information sharing plan, a statement of diversity and inclusion, and then budget table and budget narrative. Other components that are not included in the page limit but are required include indirect cost rate agreements, federal budget forms, your SF 424 and 424A, assurances for non-construction programs, the SF 424B, and certification regarding lobbying CD 511. So those are things that are required. Letters of support are also not included in the page limits and are not required, but are welcome if you would like to submit them. And I will note that with our past tribal focused competitions, letters from tribal council or similar entities have been included kind of in that letter support category. So if you need to include things like letters from the tribal council, that is a great place to submit those. Special instructions for multiple applicants with applications with the same project are included in the body of the NOFO. And please don't wait till the last minute to access grants.gov if you are putting in a proposal, as the process can take as long as 4 weeks if there's any issues or steps are not completed correctly. So we encourage you to access the grants online or grants.gov portal early in the process. So let's talk a little bit about review and selection process. For the letters of intent, those are subject to a program-led review based on relevance to the targeted competition. So that's something that we will do internally at NIDIS and provide feedback to you. Upon receipt of full applications, an administrative review will be completed for compliance with all requirements and completeness. And those that are complete will proceed to an independent panel technical review that look at technical and scientific merit, the overall qualifications of the applicant. Each reviewer will provide a score for each criteria from 1 to 5, and these scores will then be combined using weighted averages to produce a single score for this step. And more information on how those criteria are weighted can be found in the NOFO. Projects scoring at least 3 out of 5 will proceed to an independent panel review for importance, relevance, and applicability to program goals and to the goals of the competition, where each reviewer will provide a relevance score from 1 to 5. To determine the final score, the scores from the technical review will be combined with the relevance review with a weighting of 60% for technical and 40% for relevance. As a reminder for where you can find the full NOFO and the coping with the competition information sheet, we have those links here on the slide as well as in the chat box. Please read these resources thoroughly to ensure you understand fully the focus and requirements for the proposal. And again, a script of the presentation, the slide deck, a frequently asked questions document, and a recording of this webinar will be provided on the Climate Program Office Funding Opportunities website. So finally, I just want to flag that we will be offering a second informational webinar associated with this competition. This will take place on December 6th and will be focused on an overview of the feedback we've provided across the letters of intent. And it'll also be another opportunity for you to ask questions. So we want to encourage you to reach out at any time with questions. And while we can't provide feedback on specific project ideas, we're happy to answer questions about the competition or about how we work with our tribal partners through these cooperative agreements, as well as the process for applying. So we're definitely here to work with you through the application phase, and then for those successful applicant teams through the life cycle of the grant. And we know that things happen, and we can certainly work with you and have some flexibility through the life cycle of the grant. So we'll move to the Q&A portion of the website and of the webinar. And I do apologize, it's a little impersonal, but this platform allows us to track the questions to generate the FAQ, as well as do a recording for those who can't attend. So if you do have questions, Crystal and I can turn on our cameras so that's not quite as impersonal. But I will go to the question box and just start going through what has come in.
Yeah, so, Britt, I'll just stop. I have been answering some questions. Most all of them were related, or at least the ones that came in during the presentation, just ensuring that all the links that went in the chat box will be available on, you are sharing the slide deck as well as the recording, and then these links are available also throughout the various competition websites and throughout the materials, so they're basically everywhere. So that was the first few questions that came in. After that, I haven't answered any of the other questions.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I will kind of page through and see what questions kind of go beyond some of those first questions that Crystal talked about. So the first one is having a NEPA expert on the team encouraged? I guess in part it might depend on kind of the project and whether or not ground would be disturbed And then certainly being able to tap into some NEPA expertise is nice, but not required. We will work directly with the applicant to answer any questions on our end about NEPA. So far, those have been pretty straightforward. And of course, when it comes to tribal lands and cultural resources, we would definitely want to see that you're engaging in any of the processes that the tribal nations themselves have in terms of, any sort of disturbance, etc. So I'll just put that there as well. Yeah, and it looks like a question for the previous projects. I meant to say we will drop that into the chat. And for each of those projects, if you click on the title box, I had expanded 3 of them, 3 of the 5, but you can look at a brief description of the project as well on the website. And those were all developed in close partnership with the grantees. So that's all information that they're happy to share. And it's been really nice to see across that cohort of grantees and partners that there's been a lot of really interesting exchange between projects as well as they kind of learn from one another depending on what they're doing. Let's see, are there eligibility limitations for tribes that have existing awards? There is not. There is not, is the bottom line. So a tribal nation that has an existing award could still apply for this competition as well. That is all the questions I'm seeing right now. But we will just pause for a couple minutes and give you opportunity to keep typing. Let's see, I just came down to the chat box. Let's go back
There's
up.
a couple more that just popped up.
Okay, what is the level of emphasis on academic research? Seems that this is heavily focused on an academic approach. What if there are no tribal colleges identified are suitable or are a willing partner? So that is a great question. And so I will say, and then I'll let Crystal say a bit more. I don't think you need to worry about a heavy focus on an academic approach, or should I say like a Western science academic approach. We recognize that there are many ways to come at research, many knowledge systems to bring to bear. And, in the past, we did have kind of a research requirement around projects that we funded. But with the IRA funding, it's a little looser, but we want to see that activities are being implemented in a way that, perhaps things like the efficacy of an activity could be assessed, or that there's a kind of a systematic approach to determining the best indicators for, let's say, a location, a tribal nation. But that you don't necessarily need an academic partner. And if you look at some of our currently funded work, some of them have an academic partner and some don't. Some are tribal resource management entities. Trying to think offhand. Crystal, is there anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I think you captured that pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully we've answered that question. And if not, please follow up with another question if you want us to kind of dig deeper. I noticed that drought is not defined in the NOFA. Would ecological drought be appropriate subject, or is this intended for hydrologic drought? Ecological drought is absolutely appropriate. So I think there's obviously a wide swath of different definitions of drought, and we will consider them all. And certainly ecological drought is in that list. Are replenishment programs considered part of drought resilience? So I'm gonna interpret the the question to be replenishment of, let's say, aquifers or reservoirs as like during wet periods, or perhaps managing those systems differently during wet periods to build resilience during drought. And yes, any activity, whether, you know, along the spectrum of building drought resilience, would be considered. So hopefully that's what you meant by that question. And if not, again, just please feel free to put a follow-up question in the chat box, or in the question box, excuse me. Is there an evaluation component to this funding? Feel free to add some details. If you mean, I mean, we would love to see there be some way of evaluating, again, the efficacy of an activity that you would be proposing. So kind of that, you know, I won't be able to come up off the fly, but let's say you're designing an activity. So, you know, there would be a process for designing the activity, or maybe you've gone through that process and now you want to implement the activity. I mean, I think we would love to see that there's some way that you plan on evaluating, you know, whether or not that activity worked to build drought resilience. But I guess there's beyond that, there's no strict requirement for an evaluation component. Crystal, anything to add there?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Is there a general anticipated award amount winning applicant? So the upper limit in terms of the maximum award is $700,000. There's also a floor or a minimum amount of $400,000, but between those, you know, in past competitions, we've had people ask for the max, and we've had people ask for less because they don't need the max to run whatever project it is they're proposing. And I will say that, you know, from an evaluation standpoint, that doesn't matter as long as you're within the $400,000 to $700,000 in terms of the total funding. That's great. We're not evaluating. Let me put it this way. We've had questions before, like, if I propose a project that costs less, does it evaluate better? Does it seem to score better? No, it's really the project as a whole. We do assess the budget, but it's a budget assessment from the standpoint of, do the reviewers feel that the budget is adequate to do the project? So between that $400,000 and $700,000, no, there's no award amount that we're kind of looking for, if you will. How does this relate to or be helped by climate vulnerability assessment or adaptation planning that the tribe might have already done? That's a great question. So if those are already in place, then one thing that you could use this this competition for is to propose an activity that's in that plan, or something that's called for by the plan, you know, something that's needed, that has been identified in those plans. So I would say that's the best way to kind of relate the two. So if you've already done the vulnerability assessment and adaptation planning, then, you know, you could certainly look for activities within that plan to build drought resilience and propose those. When should we expect the meeting recording to be available? I hope by later today or tomorrow at the latest. It'll take us a little bit more time to get the actual documents up, but those should go up pretty quickly, the recording itself. I'm accustomed to detailed evaluation with our CDC funding. Yep. Yeah, so that is not a detailed part, or a part detailed within the NOFOA requirement. So is $2 million for nationwide award? If yes, what level of competition do you expect? So that approximate $2 million is the grand total for everything that we will be able to fund, focused on, again, the West. And what level of competition do we expect? I can only speak from past experience, and I think that last time around, I should have looked at these numbers. I will put the actual numbers into the Q&A, but I want to say we had something like 25 letters of intent and let's say 15 to or so full proposals that we evaluated. So that's the only thing I can compare to is our previous competition, but I will fact check those numbers and I will put that into the FAQ. Is there any emphasis on integrating drought into watershed planning efforts? For instance, NRCS projects related to agriculture water management could possibly link to drought and floods. Therefore, the leveraging of USDA and RCS funding outcomes would be acceptable. So yeah, building on projects that have come out of NRCS funding is totally acceptable. Again, there is no match requirement. And, you know, as you've seen by the long list of potential activities, there's no emphasis on, you know, any one kind of component of activities that might be proposed. So I would say it's always, you know, it's always nice to see that projects are building on a foundation of other work that's been done, but whether that's federal funding or projects within the tribal nation or other, you know, that's there's no requirement that it be built off of federal funding. I hope that answers that question. Are these projects considered independent of other regulatory programs like California SGMA? So I'm not sure about that program, and I'm not sure about, I'll be honest. So to answer this question, I would say if you're proposing a project in a location that has some sort of regulatory requirement, we would want to see that it is in line with that program. So for instance, not perhaps applicable to this exactly, but if, you know, if we saw a project that was proposed to do monitoring or research or something on, let's say, national park, a state park, or in this case on tribal lands, then we would want to see that the project is aligned with any requirements of any of the those that manage those lands, I guess is the best way to say that. But I'm not familiar with that program in California specifically. I'm happy to follow up with you if you want to shoot me an email. Crystal, anything else on that one?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, so the follow-up on evaluation, this usually includes performance measures and evaluation questions. Yeah, absolutely. Again, I mean, you know, depending on the activity that's proposed, we would love to see that full suite of like design, implementation, evaluation, but we don't have specific requirements as to what that evaluation looks like. So, do you recommend specific irrigation practices to be implemented and be valid with this NOFO? No, we're not gonna, you know, there's no specific practices. We would really want any practices to be in line with, again, the concerns of the tribal nation, where these practices take place, and be in line with, you know, approaches that are appropriate, both culturally and other, but we're not advocating for any specific practice or activity on the land. So let's see. Great. And yeah, we just had a sharing of the link for the CPO competition page, where the recording will be. So I think Crystal shared that. We can share it again. And hopefully everybody is seeing all of the links in the chat box. So if you're not, please post a question about that. But all those links should be in the chat box, and the recording will be on that cpo.noaa.gov, and then NIDIS funding support long title that you don't have to write down, because hopefully you're able to copy and paste this from the chat box. And we'll also we will also send a follow-up email to everyone who registered with key links, just to be sure that everybody is getting the same information. So we can certainly commit to doing that. Any other questions? We'll give it another minute or two. Hopefully this was helpful in just kind of going over all the information. Again, please, please, please reach out. My email has been in the chat box. We are more than happy to work with applicants through the process, so do not hesitate to reach out. Okay, I am not seeing any more questions coming in. Thought maybe. I'm going to give it another 30 seconds, which seems long when you're sitting in silence, but we will do that. Thank you all for joining. It was great to see the interest and how many people signed up for the webinar. So we're really excited to see what comes in through the letters of intent and then the full applications. And we're really excited to work with those of you who may be successful through the process of the competition. Okay, I am not seeing any other questions. So I think with that, we will go ahead and close. Oh, thank you. You're welcome. We just had a thank you to us and to the NIDIS for this opportunity. No, we're very happy that we're able to do this again, and looking forward to working with our next round of grantees. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your week. Oh, we have one.
There is another question, yeah.
Can you please describe how tribal organizations would meet requirements? Okay, this is one we've we've been talking about internally, and I'm going to let Crystal add to what I say. So if the tribal organization is officially part of the tribal government, a tribal government, then certainly that organization can apply. If it's a more of a regional organization, or a regional organization of, or an organization of a group of tribes, then they can apply, but we would want to see one or more tribal nations represented as full investigators on the project. We would want to see that it's kind of hard that there's money going to the tribe, and that the work is happening on tribal lands to build resilience, I think is the best way to say it. And Crystal, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, there's not really. I mean, we're just trying to ensure that, you know, individual tribes or groups of tribes or whatever that may be are benefiting directly. And I think, you know, a lot of tribal organizations are very different in how they work, how they run. So we just wanted to make it clear, made it a little bit easier to ensure that, you know, again, a tribal organization can definitely be leading the project, but it needs to be clear that there's at least one tribal nation, if not more, a part of the organization that are really also participating in it and also getting funds from the project.
Thank you. Okay. Any last minute questions before we wrap up? Yes, of course. I'm glad that this has been helpful, and you know, definitely we'll have another opportunity with the webinar on December 6th. That link to register is also on the Climate Program Office funding opportunity page. So we look forward to hopefully talking to you all again and being available to answer more questions. But again, I can't stress enough, please reach out directly if you have you know, process questions or clarifying questions. Again, we won't be able to comment on the project idea specifically, but we can certainly talk to you about the process, the requirements, any concerns or questions you have about those and how we actually move through, once the grant's funded. If you have any concerns, we can talk through that. So yeah, just really encourage you to use us as resources and reach out. Great, so I don't see any more questions coming in, so we will wrap up and get this recording posted. So thank you all very much. Best of luck through the process, and we look forward to seeing your LOIs. Take care,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone. Take care.